The Ubers format on Smogon is the format where you can use almost all the banned Pokemon. All the most powerful legendary Pokemon all on one team. And I got number 1 in the world with Scolipede in Generation 6 Ubers. There are rotating ladders on Pokemon Showdown where retro metagames of years past get a ladder, and this edition of the rotating ladder had Generation 6 Ubers. Gen 6 Ubers is one of my favorite old generation metagames, and I wanted to get number 1 in this ladder because Generation 6 Ubers has a very interesting quirk that makes Scolipede very, very deadly. To explain why, you need a little bit of a history lesson, but after that I'll talk about the team and I'll talk about the game that I won to hit number 1. Ubers has historically been defined as the tier 4 banned Pokemon. It's the wasteland where if a Pokemon is too strong for standard play, they get booted to Ubers. This includes most of your overpowered legendary Pokemon and others who have been banned like Generation 4 Garchomp. The prevailing sentiment was that this is the tier for all the overpowered strategies, all the degenerate strategies, anything you can think of, it's all fair game. And if you don't like it, play the standard tier. Ubers is the tier of chaos and that was its identity. Take it or leave it. But all that changed in Generation 6. What changed was the introduction of Mega Rayquaza. Mega Rayquaza was ridiculous beyond belief, completely dominating every other Pokemon. Every so-called overpowered legendary was nothing compared to the mighty Mega Rayquaza, and it came to the point where every battle was Mega Rayquaza versus Mega Rayquaza, and people didn't like it. It wasn't fun. After contentious debate, the community ended up banning Mega Rayquaza and creating a format above even the Ubers tier called Anything Goes, where as the name suggests, anything goes with no bans at all. Mega Rayquaza was only one ban, but it signaled a fundamental shift on what the identity of Ubers was meant to be. Ubers was now a tier for the banned Pokemon, the legendary Pokemon, yes, but if the Ubers community felt that the format would be better off with something getting banned, they would go ahead and ban it. There was no longer the belief that Ubers was something sacred that had to preserve every strategy. Anything Goes could fit that niche. And you can see that in the modern edition of Ubers. Miraidon is currently banned from Gen 9 Ubers, and perhaps more radically, even King's Rock is banned from Gen 9 Ubers. The Ubers players of 2013 would scoff at the idea of banning King's Rock, but it's illustrative of the general shift of perspective of what Ubers is meant to be. But what does Scolipede have to do with all of this? In Generation 6, even though Mega Rayquaza was banned, as a whole, relatively speaking, the community didn't want to ban a lot of stuff, and that includes the infamous strategy of Baton Pass. Baton Pass is now widely recognized as the single most broken strategy in all of competitive Pokemon. Conceptually, the ideas can get very nuanced, but to explain it simply, stat boosting is overpowered, and when you can stat boost for a different Pokemon, it becomes difficult to handle. Instead of one Pokemon being responsible for boosting and attacking, you can split those aspects into different Pokemon, making the idea incredibly efficient. Baton Pass is banned in almost every format, and it's completely banned in every Ubers format starting in Generation 7. But Generation 6, which is around when Baton Pass started being abused as a whole, never banned Baton Pass in the Ubers tier. Gen 6 Ubers does have Baton Pass counterplay. Most Baton Pass Pokemon are non-legendary Pokemon, and they get fried when you're trying to Baton Pass versus legendaries. There are also options to deal with Baton Pass like Whirlwind Ho-Oh or Taunt Mega Mewtwo. There are a lot of tangible ways to deal with Baton Pass, but I'd argue the reason it never got banned was more cultural. Ubers' identity was still in that transition period, and because of the inertia of change and stuff like Whirlwind Ho-Oh, it never got banned after the fact either, like how Machamp got banned 10 years after the fact in Generation 4 OU. And this is where Scolipede comes in. It's one of the Ubers tier's best Baton Pass Pokemon, and I used it to get number 1 on the ladder. Here's how. The main idea is that with a Focus Sash, it's incredibly easy for Scolipede to use Protect, and then safely pass a speed boost to a powerful legendary teammate. The Focus Sash also makes it easy to pass a boost like Iron Defense to its teammate too. On top of all of that, there is actually no Poison-type legendary Pokemon, so Scolipede's Toxic Spikes become incredibly deadly. The only way your opponent would have a way to pick up the Toxic Spikes is if they themselves used a non-legendary Pokemon like Tentacruel, but then they're using Tentacruel in an Ubers battle. Scolipede forms this triple threat where it can quickly Baton Pass speed, spend one turn to Baton Pass Iron Defense, or spend one turn to get up a Toxic Spike and then Baton Pass speed. And what makes the strategy work are the Ubers tier recipients. Number 1 is Geomancy Xerneas with Ingrain and Rest. Xerneas is one of the most powerful Pokemon in Gen 6 Ubers, and for good reason. Geomancy is a completely busted move. Most teams come to a battle with 2 to 3 ways to deal with Geomancy Xerneas, and even then you'll find that Xerneas is still capable of sweeping an entire team. When you baton pass speed and defense to Xerneas, you solve its only flaw. Now, Xerneas becomes an unkillable monster with a physical defense boost and a special defense boost. Ingrain prevents Xerneas from getting roared out from a Pokemon like Ho-Oh, Rest prevents against status conditions like Toxic, the speed boost helps avoid Taunt, and Xerneas' stats and power carry the rest. Really, the only way to beat a baton pass Xerneas is with a critical hit or to deny the baton pass to begin with. Similarly, the number 2 recipient is Calm Mind Arceus Ground with a combination of Ground type Judgment and Ice Beam to hit Flying type Pokemon. Arceus is one of the best sweepers in the game, with Calm Mind boosting its special defense, and its only weakness would be the physical end, which Iron Defense fixes. Along with a speed boost to outspeed Choice Scarf Pokemon, Arceus Ground is another potential Scolipede recipient. It's more vulnerable to Toxic, but in exchange is able to provide type coverage. Then at number 3 and number 4, we have the other recipients, Primal Groudon and Mega Kangaskhan. These two don't benefit as much from an Iron Defense Baton Pass, but instead they're ideal recipients for a Quick Pass, in situations where you're only able to Baton Pass speed and nothing more. Get a speed boost to Primal Groudon and watch it go to work. Because it's outsourced its speed boosting to Scolipede, it doesn't need to use Rock Polish anymore and can outfit a move like Roar. Roar is great versus opposing Geomancy Xern, and it can also be used to outspeed and roar an opposing Pokemon trying to roar you. Mega Kangaskhan is not a legendary, but it is equal in stature to most other legendary Pokemon. Parental Bond Mega Kangaskhan was so broken that they nerfed Parental Bond in Generation 7. But in Generation 6, it was amazing, and with one speed boost, all you need is one power-up punch to double your attack and then sweep a team with return. And then finally, to round off the team, there's a utility Giratina with moves like Defog to help out in awkward situations. Here's a game from the Ubers Premier League, one of the top Ubers tournaments where I use Scolipede. And then after that, we'll go to the number 1 battle. Here, I can't lead Scolipede because it's a little too obvious. Instead, I maneuver it in later in the game to set up versus an Arceus. My opponent uses Magic Coat versus Scolipede because they're expecting a move like Toxic Spikes, because they don't have a Poison-type Pokemon. But that one turn is all it takes, and Iron Defense is passed to Geomancy Xerneas. Geomancy Xern ingrains and rests to heal, but then it has to face off versus Choice Scarf Ditto. Scarf Ditto is an anti-offense Pokemon because it copies you and then outspeeds you. But because it only has 5 PP, it can struggle versus Rest Xerneas, who can heal off the damage. It unfortunately gets a critical hit to break through, but that is inherent to baton passing as an archetype. You're always one crit away from something piercing your defense. But then, Scolipede is able to find another opportunity to set up later in the game, this time versus a Xerneas. It's able to baton pass to an Arceus Ground, and Calm Mind Arceus Ground is able to easily win the game once it has Iron Defense and a speed boost. And here is the final game I played to hit number 1 on the ladder. I lead Scolipede versus Diancie. Diancie's Mega Bounce can prevent my Toxic Spikes, but it can't stop my Iron Defense. Scolipede gets the Iron Defense and Speed Boost through the Diamond Storm, and then baton passes to Xerneas. And nothing beats Xerneas through that many stat boosts because I ingrain and rest all the damage I take. They try to use Calm Mind Arceus Ghost to crit me, and fortunately it doesn't work. And with that game, I hit number 1 on the ladder. Is Baton Pass overwhelming? Should it be banned? Truthfully, one ladder run on a retro ladder doesn't mean much in the grand scheme of things. This was more of an excuse to play a format that I like. Current public opinion is still that Baton Pass is fine in some of the older generations of Ubers like Gen 6 Ubers. But that doesn't mean public opinion can't change. For example, in 2024, Gen 3 Ubers actually banned Baton Pass with 80% of voters voting to ban it. That's a stark change in opinion for a community that allowed the strategy for 21 years now. Could we see a shift in opinion in Gen 6 Ubers? Maybe, maybe not.